If you think wars are decided by strategy, wait until you see how often they're decided by panic, ego, and one unbelievably dumb mistake. Today, 33 biggest fools who shaped modern history with military blunders. We'll watch Pearl Harbor's shock, then Arnhem's bridge that never held. And stay for the last story because the ending is insane. But first, Hitler's biggest gamble begins on the Soviet border. Hitler invaded the Soviet Union and sealed Germany's fate. By winter, German tanks froze outside Moscow, and momentum vanished. In June 1941, Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa against Stalin's USSR. He expected a quick collapse, but Soviet depth swallowed whole armies. German columns raced past Minsk and Smolensk, chasing maps instead of reality. At Kiev, a giant encirclement looked brilliant, yet weeks bled away. Then autumn mud arrived, turning roads into glue under endless trucks. Fresh Siberian divisions, warned by Richard Sorge, hit back near Moscow. The war became a grinding factory contest Germany was built to lose. Hitler's shortcut created a two-front nightmare without any easy exit. 2. Hitler declared war on America after Pearl Harbor. 4 days after Pearl Harbor, Germany picked a fight it didn't need. On December 11, 1941, Adolf Hitler declared war on the United States. He expected Japan to distract Washington, buying Berlin time in Europe. Instead, Franklin Roosevelt gained a clean political path into Hitler's war. German U-boats attacked along the American coast during the Second Happy Time. But American shipyards and convoys scaled fast, like an industrial switch. Soon, U.S. troops and supplies poured into Britain, North Africa, then France. Even Churchill looked relieved, because the alliance became truly global. Hitler's speech sounded confident, yet it opened a door he couldn't close. 3. Napoleon marched on Moscow and burned his Grand Army. Napoleon reached Moscow, then watched victory turn into a ghost city. In 1812, he led the Grande Armée deep into Russia, chasing Tsar Alexander. After Borodino's brutal fight, the Russians retreated, refusing a clean surrender. Moscow wasn't defended like a fortress, it was emptied and then burned. Napoleon waited for peace offers that never came, counting days like coins. Winter and hunger attacked first, long before Cossacks finished the job. The retreat turned roads into graveyards, with frozen men and shattered wagons. Crossing the Berezina River became a desperate escape under constant pressure. His legend survived, but his army never truly returned from Russia. 4. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and united America's war machine. One sunrise in Hawaii flipped American isolation into total mobilization. On December 7, 1941, Japanese carrier planes struck Pearl Harbor without warning. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto gambled on shock, hoping America would negotiate fast. Battleships burned, like USS Arizona, while sailors fought oil fires and smoke. Yet the U.S. aircraft carriers weren't there, quietly saving future battles. Japan didn't cripple fuel tanks and repair docks, which mattered more later. Within days, Washington unified, factories roared, and recruitment lines stretched. Midway came months later, and Japan's carrier edge suddenly vanished. Pearl Harbor hurt badly, but it also woke a giant permanently. 5. Kaiser Wilhelm chose unrestricted submarine warfare and brought in America. Germany's submarine gamble turned a European war into a global one. In early 1917, Kaiser Wilhelm's leaders resumed unrestricted U-boat warfare. They believed Britain would starve before America could meaningfully intervene. Ships were sunk without warning, including neutral vessels crossing the Atlantic lanes. The Zimmermann telegram made it worse, dangling Mexico against the United States. Woodrow Wilson, once cautious, asked Congress for war with moral language. American troops arrived later, but American money and supplies moved immediately. Convoys, depth charges, and better tactics slowly strangled the U-boat campaign. Germany gained short-term fear, then gained a powerful new enemy. 6. Austria-Hungary issued the ultimatum that lit World War. A single document in Vienna helped detonate the entire continent. After Archduke Franz Ferdinand was killed in Sarajevo in June 1914, Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia and drafted an ultimatum designed to be rejected. German backing, the blank check, stiffened Vienna's resolve against compromise. Serbia accepted most demands, but balked at investigators operating inside Serbia. Vienna declared war anyway, and alliances snapped into motion like traps. Russia mobilized for Serbia, Germany mobilized against Russia and France. Within weeks, Europe was marching, and the Schlieffen Plan rolled westward. The ultimatum wasn't just pressure, it was a fuse with no pause. 7. Tsar Nicholas II entered World War I unprepared. Russia joined the war fast, then bled faster than it could learn. In 1914, Tsar Nicholas II approved mobilization despite weak industry and railways. Russian armies invaded East Prussia early, hoping to relieve pressure on France. At Tannenberg, Generals Hindenburg and Ludendorff trapped Samsonov's Second Army. Radio messages were sent unencrypted, basically handing Germans the Russian plan. Nicholas later took personal command, tying the monarchy to every defeat. Supply shortages meant rifles arrived late, sometimes shared between soldiers. Homefront anger grew, feeding strikes, mutiny, and revolutionary politics in 1917. His decision wasn't one mistake, it was stepping onto collapsing ice. 8. Stalin ignored invasion warnings before Barbarossa hit. The attack came anyway, and the first days were catastrophic for Moscow. In 1941, Joseph Stalin received warnings from spies, diplomats, even deserters. Richard Sorgi in Tokyo signaled timing, yet Stalin suspected British manipulation. Soviet forces stayed in vulnerable positions, with aircraft lined up like targets. When Germany struck, entire airfields were wrecked before pilots even launched. Front commanders hesitated, fearing Stalin's wrath more than German panzers. Encirclements at Minsk and Smolensk swallowed units before organized retreats began. Only later did Stalin loosen control and let generals fight realistically. His mistrust didn't stop the invasion, it just magnified the opening disaster. 9. France trusted the Maginot Line and left the Ardennes open. France built concrete confidence, then lost the war through the forest. Between wars, French planners invested heavily in the Maginot Line fortifications. They expected a repeat of 1914, with Germany smashing straight into strong defenses. But in May 1940, German armor pushed through the Ardennes, judged impassable. At Sedan, crossings over the Meuse broke the French front like glass. Panzer columns raced to the English Channel, cutting off Allied armies in Belgium. The evacuation at Dunkirk saved soldiers, but France's strategic position collapsed. Paris fell weeks later, faster than almost anyone believed possible. The Maginot Line stood, but the war walked around it. 10. Britain lost Singapore in a week of shock. The Gibraltar of the East fell so fast, it stunned the empire. In February 1942, Japanese forces attacked Singapore after sweeping down Malaya. General Tomoyuki Yamashita advanced aggressively, even while short on supplies. British defenses expected seaborne assault, but the main blow came overland. Australian and Indian units fought hard, yet air superiority belonged to Japan. Japanese troops crossed the Johor Strait, pushing towards city reservoirs and roads. Lieutenant General Arthur Percival surrendered, with huge numbers captured afterward. Winston Churchill called it Britain's worst disaster, and he wasn't exaggerating. Singapore proved that old prestige meant nothing without preparation and aircraft. 11. Mussolini invaded Greece and drained Axis strength. Italy tried a quick win and instead begged Germany for help. In October 1940, Benito Mussolini ordered an invasion of Greece from Albania. He wanted glory without telling Adolf Hitler, chasing headlines and ego. The Greeks fought back fiercely, pushing Italians into humiliating retreats. Winter mountains, bad roads, and poor logistics turned offensives into misery. Mussolini kept throwing divisions in, like coins into a broken machine. Hitler finally intervened in 1941, dragging Germany into the Balkans campaign. That operation delayed Barbarossa preparations, tightening the timetable before winter. Mussolini's side adventure burned strength when the Axis needed every hour. 12. The Ottoman Empire joined World War I and fell apart. One alliance choice pulled an aging empire into a war it couldn't survive. In late 1914, the Ottoman Empire aligned with Germany and Austria-Hungary. The German ships Goeben and Breslau helped pull Istanbul toward war. Fighting erupted at Gallipoli, in Mesopotamia, and across the Caucasus Mountains. British forces marched toward Baghdad, while Ottoman troops struggled with supplies. Arab revolt politics and battlefield losses cracked imperial control from within. By 1918, defeat brought armistice, occupations, and the empire's dissolution. Out of the wreckage came new borders, mandates, and nationalist movements. The Ottomans didn't just lose battles, they lost the map itself. 13. Germany sent Lenin back to Russia and unleashed revolution. Germany tried to weaken Russia, then created a far bigger problem. In 1917, German officials facilitated Vladimir Lenin's sealed train journey to Petrograd. They hoped Bolshevik agitation would pull Russia out of World War I quickly. Lenin arrived with slogans discipline and a plan to seize power. By October 1917, the Bolsheviks toppled the provisional government in Petrograd. Russia exited the war with the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, shocking the Allies. But civil war followed, and the Soviet state hardened through violence and scarcity. Germany gained breathing room briefly, then faced a revolutionary superpower later. That train ride looked tactical, yet it changed the 20th century. 14. The Gallipoli landing turned into a costly stalemate. A bold shortcut to knock out the Ottomans became a brutal hillside trap. In 1915, Allied leaders tried forcing the Dardanelles to reach Russia by sea. Landings hit rugged cliffs at Gallipoli, where Ottoman defenders held tight trenches. Mustafa Kemal rallied troops, telling them to hold ground at all costs. Poor maps and confusion split forces, leaving beachheads pinned under constant fire. Heat, flies, and disease weakened units as much as bullets did. Months passed with little movement, just attacks, counterattacks, and exhausted digging. Eventually, the Allies evacuated, one of the few clean parts of the campaign. Gallipoli became legend in Australia and Turkey, forged from terrible miscalculation. 15. Operation Market Garden reached a bridge too far. The plan promised a quick war-ending dash, then bogged down in chaos. In September 1944, Montgomery launched Operation Market Garden across the Netherlands. Airborne troops would seize bridges, while British armor raced up a narrow road. At Arnhem, the last bridge proved hardest, with SS units unexpectedly nearby. British paratroopers under John Frost held positions, but relief arrived too slowly. The single roadway became a traffic jam under German artillery and ambushes. Radio failures and scattered drops made coordination feel like shouting into fog. After days, survivors withdrew, and the Rhine remained uncrossed for months. Market Garden looked daring, but reality punished every optimistic assumption. 16. The Somme offensive promised breakthrough and delivered disaster. On the first day, thousands fell, and the front barely moved. In July 1916, Britain and France attacked along the Somme River in France. Weeks of shelling were supposed to cut wire and destroy German trenches. Instead, many German dugouts survived, and machine guns stayed terrifyingly intact. British soldiers advanced in lines, believing the bombardment had done enough. The battlefield became craters, smoke, and mud, swallowing men and plans. Tanks appeared later, new and unreliable, offering hope but not salvation. Months of fighting gained limited ground at enormous human cost. The Somme became a synonym for industrial slaughter, not tactical brilliance. 17. General Haig repeated frontal attacks, despite machine guns. Commanders kept ordering go over the top, and men kept paying. Field Marshal Douglas Haig believed pressure and attrition would finally break Germany. He pushed large offensives like Passchendaele, even as conditions turned monstrous. At Ypres in 1917, rain created a swamp that ate horses and guns. Infantry attacks met interlocking machine gun fire, then stalled in deep mud. Haig's headquarters stayed optimistic, reading maps instead of listening to trenches. Gains were measured in yards, while medical stations overflowed behind the lines. British Empire forces, including Canadians and Australians, bore repeated assaults. Haig's strategy wasn't stupidity alone, it was faith in a wrong formula. 18. Russia's 1905 Tsushima defeat shattered a fleet overnight. Tsushima lined a fleet overnight. A fleet sailed halfway around the world, then vanished in 2 days. In 1905, Russia's Baltic Fleet met Japan's Navy at the Battle of Tsushima. Admiral Zinovy Rozhestevensky arrived exhausted, poorly trained, and low on morale. Admiral Togo Heiichiro crossed the Russian T, concentrating fire with precision. Japanese gunnery and speed shredded Russian ships in the Tsushima Strait. Some Russian crews fired wildly, and others surrendered after chaos spread. Only a handful escaped to Vladivostok, while many ships sank or burned. The defeat shook Russian politics, feeding the 1905 revolution at home. Tsushima proved that modern war punishes long voyages and outdated command systems. 19. The charge of the Light Brigade misread orders in Crimea. A poetic legend began as a deadly misunderstanding on a battlefield. In 1854, at Balaclava, British cavalry received an order passed through confusion. Lord Raglan's message became distorted by Lord Lucan and Lord Cardigan. The Light Brigade charged straight down a valley lined with Russian guns. They weren't aiming at the intended target, they were riding into artillery. French allies watched, stunned, as horses and men fell in waves. Some reached the batteries, then had to retreat through the same fire corridor. The bravery was real, but the communication chain was disastrously broken. It became famous, yet fame doesn't bring back riders lost to misread words. 20. Pickett's charge walked straight into Union cannons. In minutes, a grand assault became a field of shattered brigades. On July 3, 1863, Robert E. Lee ordered a frontal attack at Gettysburg. George Pickett's division joined others, marching across open ground toward Cemetery Ridge. Union artillery under Henry Hunt waited, then opened with devastating timing. Confederate lines kept moving because turning back felt like admitting defeat. A few reached the stone wall, a moment later called the high water mark. Then musket volleys and counterattacks forced survivors to run back in panic. Lee rode among them, accepting blame, while his army's hopes collapsed. Pickett later said he couldn't because the Yankees had too much firepower. 21. Lee invaded the North and lost at Gettysburg. Lee saw one bold victory in Pennsylvania and met a brutal grinder. In summer 1863, Robert E. Lee marched the Army of Northern Virginia northward. He hoped to relieve Virginia, feed his men, and pressure Northern politics. Skirmishes around Gettysburg grew unexpectedly into a 3-day battle of giants. Union forces under George Meade held strong ground, especially Cemetery Hill and Ridge. Confederates attacked on multiple fronts, from Little Round Top to the center. Lee lacked his cavalry eyes early, with J.E.B. Stuart riding elsewhere. After defeat, the retreat to Virginia was tense, with swollen rivers in pursuit. Gettysburg didn't end the war, but it ended Lee's best chance. 22. McClellan moved too slowly after finding Lee's plans. The Union held a miracle document, then let the moment slip away. In September 1862, Union soldiers found Lee's Special Order 191 near Frederick, Maryland. George B. McClellan suddenly knew Confederate positions, like holding the enemy's map. Yet he moved cautiously, fearing traps and overestimating Lee's strength again. That delay let Lee concentrate near Sharpsburg, setting up the Battle of Antietam. Fighting became savage along the cornfield, Bloody Lane, and Burnside Bridge. The Union gained a tactical edge, but failed to destroy Lee's army. Lincoln later lost patience, seeing caution where urgency demanded speed. McClellan had the keys, but he refused to turn them quickly. 23. Custer split his force and lost at Little Bighorn. A confident cavalry charge ended with silence on a Montana hillside. In June 1876, George Armstrong Custer pursued Lakota and Cheyenne near Little Bighorn. He divided the 7th Cavalry into separate battalions, expecting a smaller camp. Instead, he faced a huge gathering led by leaders like Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. Custer attacked fast, but his separated units couldn't support each other in time. Warriors swarmed from multiple directions, using terrain and numbers with brutal efficiency. Custer and his immediate command were wiped out, later called Custer's Last Stand. Other detachments survived by holding defensive positions until relief arrived. The shock reshaped U.S. policy, hardening conflict across the plains. 24. Admiral Halsey chased a decoy and left Leyte exposed. At Leyte Gulf, a missed signal nearly turned victory into catastrophe. In October 1944, Admiral William Halsey pursued Japanese decoy carriers northward. Admiral Gisaburo, Ozawa's force, existed mainly to lure American battleships away. Halsey took the bait, leaving the San Bernardino Strait dangerously uncovered. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita's ships slipped through, threatening U.S. escort carriers off Samar. Tiny American destroyers charged heroically, firing torpedoes against massive cruisers and battleships. Confusion, smoke, and boldness helped convince Kurita to withdraw unexpectedly. Only later did commanders realize how close the invasion fleet came to disaster. Halsey won the campaign, but his chase created one terrifying gap. 25. MacArthur underestimated China and escalated the Korean War. A march to the border became a sudden sprint backwards south. In late 1950, General Douglas MacArthur pushed toward the Yalu River in Korea. He believed China wouldn't intervene, despite warnings from Beijing and intelligence reports. Then Chinese People's Volunteers struck in waves, moving at night through mountains. UN units were surprised, stretched thin, and forced into freezing retreats. The Chosin Reservoir fighting became legendary, with Marines breaking out under pressure. Seoul changed hands again, and the war shifted from victory dreams to stalemate. MacArthur argued publicly, and Harry Truman eventually removed him from command. Underestimating China turned a limited war into a long, costly grind. 26. The Bay of Pigs invasion backfired and strengthened Castro. A secret invasion meant to topple Castro instead made him look unbreakable. In April 1961, CIA-backed Cuban exiles of Brigade 2506 landed at the Bay of Pigs. The plan assumed locals would rise up, and Castro's forces would crumble quickly. But Cuban security crushed networks, and the expected uprising never materialized. Air support was limited, and the landing zone became a trap under fire. Fidel Castro personally toured the front, turning defense into a televised triumph. Most invaders were captured, and negotiations later traded prisoners for supplies. John F. Kennedy looked inexperienced, and Soviet confidence in Cuba grew. The fiasco didn't remove Castro, it locked him into power harder. 27. America's Vietnam body count strategy misread the war. In Vietnam, the scoreboard said winning, while reality said the opposite. U.S. commanders often measured progress by enemy body counts and kill ratios. That approach pushed search and destroy missions, chasing contact instead of holding communities. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese could replace losses faster than expected. Villages were pressured, trust eroded, and civilians sometimes saw Americans as temporary. Statistics rose, but political legitimacy and local security kept slipping away. Meanwhile, guerrillas chose when to fight, then melted back into terrain. Washington heard optimistic briefings, while television showed a different story nightly. Counting bodies couldn't count willpower, which was the war's hidden center. 28. Argentina invaded the Falklands and misjudged Britain. A short patriotic war became a cold, punishing lesson in distance. In April 1982, Argentina's junta under Leopoldo Galtieri seized the Falkland Islands. They expected Britain to protest, then negotiate, because the islands felt far away. Margaret Thatcher sent a task force south, turning the Atlantic into a battlefield. The cruiser ARA General Belgrano was sunk, and the stakes escalated sharply. British troops landed at San Carlos, then marched across peat and wind. Air attacks were intense, with Exocet missiles and low-flying raids terrifying ships. After fighting at Goose Green and around Port Stanley, Argentina surrendered. The invasion backfired politically, collapsing the junta and hardening British resolve. 29. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan bled for a decade. The Soviet Union entered Afghanistan expecting control and found endless resistance. In late 1979, Soviet troops moved into Kabul and installed Babrak Karmal. They aimed to stabilize a friendly regime, but Afghan society fractured into revolt. Mujahideen fighters used mountains, villages, and borders to stay elusive. Soviet convoys faced ambushes, mines, and attacks that vanished into valleys. Stinger missiles later threatened helicopters, changing the air war's balance sharply. The conflict drained money and morale, while casualties quietly climbed. By 1989, Soviet forces withdrew, leaving a shattered state behind. It became a slow-motion quagmire, haunting Moscow long after the exit. 30. Russia's Winter War exposed Red Army weakness. A giant army stumbled against Finnish skis, forests, and stubborn defense. In 1939, the Soviet Union invaded Finland, expecting a quick, easy victory. Finnish forces under Carl Gustaf Emil Mannerheim used the terrain mercilessly. Soviet columns stayed on roads, making perfect targets in narrow forest corridors. The mighty tactics split units, isolating them like logs cut apart. Poor leadership and purges left the Red Army rigid and fearful. Eventually, Soviet numbers forced concessions, but the price shocked the world. Adolf Hitler watched closely, drawing dangerous conclusions about Soviet weakness. Finland lost land, yet proved that preparation can embarrass a superpower. 31. Napoleon's Peninsular War drained France's best troops. Spain looked like a side project, then became Napoleon's bleeding wound. In 1808, Napoleon placed his brother Joseph on Spain's throne, sparking revolt. Spanish guerrillas attacked supply lines, turning occupation into constant surprise fights. British forces under Arthur Wellesley, later Wellington, exploited the chaos skillfully. French marshals fought each other's egos while chasing shadows across villages. Battles like Talavera and Salamanca showed how fast French control could slip. The war consumed hundreds of thousands of troops who never reached other fronts. Napoleon later called it the Spanish ulcer, and the name fit. While he chased glory elsewhere, Spain quietly helped break his empire. 32. Hitler split forces towards Stalingrad and the Caucasus. Germany reached the Volga, but its strategy split like cracked ice. In 1942, Hitler launched Case Blue, aiming for oil in the Caucasus. He also obsessed over Stalingrad, a symbolic city bearing Stalin's name. Forces were divided between Army Group A south and Army Group B eastward. Supply lines stretched, while Romanian and Italian troops guarded flanks with limited equipment. Street fighting in Stalingrad became a room-by-room nightmare under constant rubble. Then, Operation Uranus encircled the 6th Army, trapping Friedrich Paulus inside. Air resupply failed, winter tightened, and surrender came early 1943. The split didn't just slow Germany, it set the stage for disaster. 33. The German U-boat war overreached and lost the Atlantic. U-boats nearly strangled Britain, then technology turned the ocean against them. Admiral Karl Dönitz built wolf packs to swarm convoys in the Atlantic. Early successes felt unstoppable, especially along America's coast after 1941. But convoys improved, escorts multiplied, and air patrols extended their reach. Radar, sonar, and code-breaking squeezed submarines like lights in a dark room. Long-range aircraft closed the mid-Atlantic gap, removing safe hunting zones. By 1943, U-boat losses surged, and crews knew odds were turning. Germany kept building submarines, but training time and fuel were running out. The Atlantic became less a hunting ground, more a watery death trap.